Who's ready for a good old-fashioned talk about hacking stuff? All right. Maybe. Welcome to my talk. We'll discuss today leveraging a website as a watering hole attack. When's the last time anyone heard that term? Probably early 2000s, right? But it works. It's really through the use of browser web workers, and I have to caveat everything with this is a terrible and irresponsible idea. So use it at your own risk. But it was a lot of fun. I had a great time. This is one of my favorite attack paths ever, just because it's wild and crazy and unthought of. I also kept hearing throughout yesterday and today everybody giving goals for their talk, and I realized I don't really have a goal. I better come up with one, so everyone write this down. I really want to highlight that relying on strong external controls and ignoring your internal controls is a really bad idea. You can't rely on having a strong and crunchy outer layer and a soft and chewy inner layer, because crazy folks like me and my former team will come along and shake things up a little bit, as you'll see here. I just also wanted to note that all names, dates, timestamps, everything have been altered to protect the guilty. Everything's changed except for probably the most fantastic parts of this talk. All right, a little quick agenda. We'll go through who I am and why anybody should care, as well as what we're actually going to talk about browser web workers, which is the key feature of this attack, and look at how can we actually leverage it in modern day. We did this a few years ago, and things have changed a little bit, or at least it was more difficult to find the actual vulnerable instances we were attacking back then. So who am I? Really, I've been in IT and security for about 25-ish years. My gray hair should be proof enough for everyone. First half heavily focused on blue team, reverse engineering, threat hunting, all of the fun stuff there, which led me into red teaming, malware dev, all of the fun and sexy stuff that goes along with red teaming as a consultant, into private red teams, which generated this talk. And now I'm back on the blue team trying to run a security operations center. Every red teamer, it's easy for us to talk a lot of shit about blue team. So I figure I better figure it out. Could I actually do it? If given the opportunity, could I protect an organization? And so far, so good. I should knock on wood after saying that. My phone's going to go off in about 5 minutes. I am a grumpy old man. I find myself saying things like, back in my day, we didn't have mass scan. We scanned /8s with Nmap. It never finished, and we liked it. Anyone besides me still use fping on pen tests? No, I didn't think so. All right. Oh, man. All right. Why are we actually here? We're here to talk about browser web workers. What is that? This is the craziest thing I'd heard in about 20 years. I'm going to read this word for word. You can read it word for word because it's ridiculous. Web workers are a simple means for web content to run scripts in background threads. That should cause you to say what right now? The worker thread, this is within your browser. The worker thread could perform tasks without interfering with the user interface. So you don't have to display anything on the web page while a web worker is executing. They can make network requests, this is bolded and underlined for many reasons, using the fetch or HTTP request API. And this is kind of the attack path that we chose. So anyone visiting my website, I can have their browser run code. Where could that person be living when they visit my web page and have my code running? On an internal corporate network, hopefully. How do they work? Basically, you instantiate a web worker. We'll look at a little more code. So hopefully that's large enough for folks to see. And if you can't see, feel free to move up. There's plenty of seats. The worker then executes the JavaScript in the background, just as described. You can exchange messages, meaning you can send a web worker to execute something and have it report back. It's actually kind of cool. It's like your little own JavaScript helper guy. I finally found a valid use for JavaScript. As you'll hear throughout this talk, I hate Java. JavaScript has nothing to do with Java. I hate it anyway. It's a thing. And if you've known me for 20 minutes, I've probably bitched about Java programs, so I'm going to do it some more. Why would you typically use a web worker? There has to be a reason other than for me to do cool red team stuff with. Most frequently, it just offloads tasks for the browser. Damage tracking in a game, syntax highlighting. Think like it can go fetch an updated stock price and report back. That's a typical use case for web workers. Which brings us to, how can I abuse them and why potentially you should think about it, but be careful. And the first bullet point there is probably the most important, is you have to do your OSINT in order for this attack to be successful, because it's highly targeted. We'll look at the targets a little bit later. But you think about, what could a company be running internally that they never patch? Because there's always something that they never patch. Jenkins, Jira, Confluence, manage engine things, all of those things that people say it's internal, so I don't need to update, and I don't want to break my CI/CD pipeline, so I'm going to leave it on the oldest version known to man. All you have to do then is get someone to visit your website, and your web workers will execute. Keep in mind, you are literally spraying an exploit across a network. And this is what we did. We'll get into the details later. But when I say this is irresponsible, it's pretty irresponsible. But it also worked, so I don't know. You are consuming browser resources. Remember that when they visit the website, we scanned a /24. That's a whole lot of IP addresses. We do chunk it up. And again, we'll take a look at the code that does that. So that we didn't blue screen anybody's browser, at least that we know of. But it would definitely slow things down. So the key is to entice them to stay on the website. Think about making a form that just errors no matter what they put in, and tells them to refill out the form. They'll stay on there for a minute, and that's really all you need. All right. So what does that look like? This is an example of code that it's the building blocks for the actual exploit. This one, basically what we're looking at is it will determine if it's from the correct ASN. And in this case, I just wanted it to be that it's not Microsoft. This is just an example. Make sure you understand your target, back to the whole do your OSINT piece. You have to do all of your OSINT in order to be successful. But anyway, it determines, says, hey, this isn't from Microsoft, so go ahead and do my network scanner. We host the main JavaScript. There's multiple pieces of JavaScript. The main JavaScript, which is what we're looking at here, calls the web worker scripts that are buried internally to the website. We buried them, like 3 folders deep, just for some level of obfuscation. In the example in the code that's on GitHub, it's all on the same level, just because I wanted to make things easy for me. Okay, so at the top we instantiate the web worker. Again, hopefully you can see that, the top left. We instantiate our web worker, checks a visitor's IP address and make sure that's in the right ASN, not Microsoft at this point, and takes action based on the result. In this case, I did have a report back and update the website. Again, we'll see it in the demo. But that's the key, targeting the correct ASN. We create a range within our target CIDR and then scan. So basically we're splitting up. I'm going to struggle here. But anyway, the function on the bottom left leading up to the functions on the top right are where we kind of split up. We only scan 10 IPs at a time, because about 95% of your IPs are actually going to error or time out. Again, thinking about conserving browser resources, that's a lot of time for it to be sitting and waiting. But that's all the code. And once it hits, once we get through all of that, again, literally spraying your exploit across a whole /24. So super exciting and wildly dangerous. All right. So what did this look like? What was kind of the origin of the talk? Well, ideally it's been long enough. It's been a few years, and I wanted to share some of this with folks because it's a little scary when you sit and think about it from a blue team perspective. So we're part of a long-running red team campaign. Spanning literally multiple years. And this particular campaign was my first one as a lead red teamer. We needed a way in externally. We had one remaining long haul callback, meaning we had one thing on the internal network that was still calling back. We had no desire to burn that because it was our last one. We needed a new way in. But, some organizations that request red teams are pretty mature, and this was definitely the case. We had nothing externally that we could find that we could get any type of foothold in. And Brett Brewerhouse, he gave me the okay to use his name, came up with the idea. He said, hey, have you ever, he's actually a kind of an AppSec guy. He mentioned, have you ever heard of browser web workers? And I said, no. I'm not an AppSec guy, never was. He started to explain everything that we just went through on the first few slides, and my mind was blown. I'd never heard of such a thing. It's been around for a long time. Mozilla, Chrome-based browsers all have this feature enabled. The other interesting fact that coincided with was Orange Sci, hopefully I'm saying that right, had just released a Jenkins exploit. Basically, the exploit chained multiple CVEs together, resulting in remote code execution. Nobody, and I shouldn't say this, nobody should have Jenkins on the internet, and this organization didn't either, but we knew based on our previous campaigns, they had multiple Jenkins instances all over the place, all unpatched, all on vulnerable versions. So we knew if we could at least reach them, we'd probably get a shell. A little bit of an interesting aside, it did require development of a Java dropper. And I, unfortunately, was the only one at the time that had any Java development experience. And if I've known you for 20 minutes or longer, you've heard me bitch about my college experience learning Java programming. I almost failed programming because I couldn't get my stupid amortization calculator to graphically display the payments. Which caused me to hate not only Java but programming for years and years and years until I became a red teamer and found Python and figured out everything was super easy. So that's the genesis of my hate for Java. But I had to come up with a Java dropper because this particular this Jenkins exploit would reach out and grab a jar file and execute it. Super nice of Jenkins to do that for us. So basically, development, and again, the Java dropper is actually part of the code release. I'll have my GitHub at the end as well, so that no one ever has to go through the pain of developing a Java dropper. It'll be there for you, including the encoder. I call it encoding. It's encrypting, but the password's in the code, so that's not really encrypting, right? I don't know. Ultimately we put all this together, cloned a super cool web page and sent our phishing emails and kind of twiddled our thumbs and waited. We thought we'd be swimming in shells because we knew, there had to have been at least like 50, no kidding, 50 vulnerable Jenkins instances internally. But we only got one single callbacks. Again, back to the maturity of organizations. In every production Jenkins or Jenkins instance that supplied code to production, they didn't allow internet access. Super smart. One developer server, of course, was allowed access to the internet, so we got a shell. We did learn at the end of the campaign, because we were doing our cleanup, that the rest of those Jenkins instances that were on this specific subnet were also owned as well. They just couldn't reach the internet, so we never had a shell. So we had to apologize to IT and buy them a couple beers for cleaning up all of our crap. Yeah, cool story, bro, right? That's awesome. Great to reminisce with me, isn't it? But what can we really do with that? and again, we talked about it already. What else out there do organizations run that is constantly full of holes that they believe they don't have to patch because it's too critical to their build pipeline or whatever critical process exists internally that you can attack with the web request? Remember, that's the key as well. You know, we talked about Fortinet, Managed Engine, TeamCity recently, right? But what about Confluence? Which brings us to the most recent, I think this is the most recent Confluence exploit, at least it was when I started developing this talk. There's an unauthenticated template injection vulnerability in Confluence server. The cool part is Confluence is making a huge push for everyone to go to the cloud. Nobody was vulnerable. Guess what? People still run Confluence on-prem. Multiple 8.x versions are affected by the vulnerability, and multiple endpoints, which makes the attack surface pretty broad, as well as detections more difficult. We'll talk a little bit about detections later. But anyway, it's also exploitable by an HTTP post request. So this meets all of our criteria for an external attack, right? Again, how do we pull this off? Phish everyone, get them to visit our website. Once on the website, web workers execute JavaScript in the background. Code will validate the IP address. If in the correct ASN, launch our exploit spray. Keep in mind it's a spray. If not, do nothing. You know, protect the folks that you aren't actually targeting. We are supposed to be somewhat responsible. All right, and again, I hope that's large enough, but this is an example. This is a watering hole that was developed. Our HTML, which is on the right-hand side, calls main.js, which is, the HTML is also on the left side, I apologize. But our main.js, as you can see, that's contained within the HTML, calls the confluence.js to spray the exploit. We need some hook to get folks to stay on the web page, and puppies and kitties are an amazing way to get folks to stay on a web page. This another fun aside, I asked ChatGPT, hey, give me a watering hole website. Of course, it didn't want to at first, but after some convincing, it gave me a watering hole website, but felt the need to explain what a watering hole website was. So I just left it in there because it was kind of funny. All right, exploit code. This is actual Confluence exploit. It basically makes a request to that the inline.vm. It's basically providing template injection, so it's providing a template. The constant data at the very bottom is really the attack exploit. Keep in mind that the code that's released on GitHub has anti-skid technology, so it won't work out of the box. I couldn't release this because it's stupid easy. I mean, this exploit works pretty flawlessly. So anyway, yeah. A little bit about the testing architecture, just to make sure that it's clear that the idea, again, is that the developer desktop or the victim desktop, that is the only piece that has actual connectivity to the Confluence server. The attacker infrastructure is completely separate. I actually put the attacker infrastructure in AWS, and the corporate internal network was part of GCP. Again, to kind of maintain that separation. I don't know, in terms of research these days, it's easy, right? Everything is Dockerized, so this was really just a Docker container running Confluence on a Linux server. You know, thanks to all the containerization folks for making exploit research a little easier. In the past, like when we were testing the original Jenkins exploit, we didn't have that luxury. We had to manually install Jenkins and apply all of the plugins, because the exploit actually affected a core plugin that everyone used. But anyway, interesting aside on the ease of exploit these days. Ease of exploit research, it's easier, right? Something like that. All right, again, cool story, bro, but what does that actually look like? So I'm going to hope that this actually runs, but before I attempt to run it, let me explain what we're looking at. On the right-hand side is actually the victim, And it's just demonstrating that we have access to a vulnerable Confluent server. At the bottom, I'm just running Wireshark so that I can capture the actual, when it actually hits the Confluent server. You'll also see it spray. I'll bring up the browser, the network piece of the browser so you can see it spraying across multiple IP addresses. On the left is just our attacker server waiting for a shell. All right, yep, just highlighting vulnerable Confluence version and that this is on the internal network. And now I'm going to visit the phishing website. And at the bottom is the network tab for developer view. And you'll see the spraying right there, right at the bottom. It's hitting multiple endpoints or attempting to, literally spraying this exploit, this post request across all of those IP addresses. Again, there's 256 and /24 to 255, depending on who you want to argue with. This is Jarrod freaking out because I need to get this recording done, so I'm making sure that I'm only capturing on the appropriate IP address. And as soon as I do that, for whatever reason, my shell is spawned. Win. All right. All right. Okay, again, that's kind of cool. And it's a cool method, right? But one of the problems with all attacks is you rely on infrastructure. And I don't think he's in here, but last year I actually was talking to Nate about this attack. And he was like, you ever heard of Cloudflare workers? He's like, it's the exact same thing. And I was like, no way. So anyway, I remembered that as I was developing this talk, and I thought, well, if I'm going to give a talk on spraying stuff, might as well, why manage my own infrastructure? Why not use something trusted? Cloudflare is pretty trusted, right? They have web workers. And web workers, it's fun. They provide a serverless open external link to an execution environment that allows you to create new applications without maintaining infrastructure. It's like a red teamer's dream, right? The worst aspect of red teaming is maintaining infrastructure and categorizing your stupid domains. Anyway, there we go. There's Cloudflare web workers in a nutshell again. And the key is that it's a trusted platform. And I'll be honest with you, I was worried about this at first. I didn't want to do much more research. It's stupid easy. I asked ChatGPT to give me a web worker HTML template, and ChatGPT spit it out. I put in the attack code, which we'll see in the demo, and it worked. Pretty ridiculous. All right, all the stuff that I just said, right? Set up serverless application to host web content that houses our JavaScript. Repeat everything we just talked about. Phish them, get them to visit your website somehow, hopefully with puppies and kitties, to get them to stay. So again, what does that really look like? This is essentially the exact same setup. Same victim, but this time they're going to go to a trusted website, which you'll get a little bit of a preview for. And again, the code for the HTML for the web worker is in the GitHub repo. It's very simple. It is also anti-skidded, so get skills. Okay, I have to apologize. It's not the same web page. ChatGPT took a break that day. I don't know. It made me have to actually click a button to post, but everything remains the same. If they just visit the website, the JavaScript will execute. As we'll see, this one sprayed a lot faster. I didn't bother chunking it up because ChatGPT was lazy and I didn't want to ask it to. All the same post requests, and once again, we get a shell. Yay, winning. All right. So how do we stop this? Nicholas doesn't like this. He wants to keep everything for all the red teamers, but I shifted to blue teams, so now we at least have to talk about it. A little bit good luck. There are ways to detect, there are ways to prevent east-west traffic monitoring for specifically exploits, or why is this single device attempting to reach multiple IPs on a subnet in rapid succession? That's anomalous. Most people don't do that behavior. And again, browser isolation is another method, but not many folks are going down that path. That's difficult. It's not difficult. It's getting people to adopt it that's difficult. And again, back to encouraging blue team that, look, we can no longer rely on not patching our stuff, because there's crazy folks like Jarrod out there that'll just spray it anyway. Who cares? YOLO, right? And to really take patching seriously, especially, so back to, hopefully folks saw a couple of the talks around threat modeling. This applies. Threat model, include this in your threat model, because no longer is it theory. This is going to be on the internet, posted for everyone to see. It's reality. So include this in your threat model and understand what could be attacked from the outside, but from a browser on the inside. And we also heard a bunch of talks thinking about Chris Roberts yesterday, going back to basics. Make sure you know what's on your network, what is housing, the technologies that exist, and potentially even really look at zero trust. I feel like that's a little bit of a shiny object, but at the same time, if you don't explicitly trust every request that comes from everybody's browser, you can mitigate weird things like this. I don't know, anybody else have any thoughts on detections? Put everyone on the spot a little bit. We got a lot of smart people.
There's no way to disable web workers from Chrome settings or anything like that?
Yeah, likely. I guess I'm not sure yet. Because you're disabling so much functionality in web pages. Yeah, it's a feature of modern browsing.
If a host-to-host, when you look at east-west traffic, you wouldn't expect an HR person to be reaching out to Jenkins. So if you can't segment, you should at least know what's normal in your environment, and either detect it or block it.
Yeah.
Wait, so you say zero trust? Sorry. So this spray is through a post request, right?
Correct. It could be a GET request.
Windows endpoint, a laptop to another laptop, why would a laptop to a laptop be making a post request? I mean, that might be something we can catch, maybe.
Yeah. Keep in mind though that this specific exploit relies on a post request. Jenkins relied on a GET request.
Is there any other use case for when you're trying to reach out to an internal IP?
Well, not that I'm aware of, but it depends on where the web page is hosted, because if it's an internally developed page, then yes. But if it is on the internet, then I hope not. Yeah, it's highly anomalous. Go ahead.
Somebody else will patch your stuff.
Yeah. Yeah, that's again back to we can't have the crunchy exterior and soft and chewy interior. You always patch your stuff. Encourage IT teams, and hopefully there's no IT folks in here. Encourage them to prioritize. I was going to say stop being lazy, but everybody's too busy for that. Prioritize this patching.
Did the execution of this exploit help you in some story about taking care of those patches on the inside?
100%. Because the reason we knew that there were this many vulnerable versions is because every red team engagement, we wound up attacking them and taking them over. And every report that went by, they're like, But you were inside. You're the red team. It doesn't matter. So, which is why this was exactly as you say, much more impactful that it no longer matters that we were inside. We got in from the outside and yeah, patch your stuff. So yeah, that's a lot of expensive stuff to fix. User behavior analytics, that's expensive. East-west traffic monitoring, depending how you do it, is expensive. Prioritizing and dedicating time to patching, maybe less expensive. I don't know. Someone else can do the math. All right. Again, like I said, the GitHub should be public right now. Jinky J read that's just the code name for this talk. Any other questions? You can feel free to reach out to me on Twitter. I don't post anything but random Jocko pics anyway. So yeah, what's up?
Did you guys do any research around like collecting local system metadata from the web worker? So grabbing a local IP address, or like is it, I don't know if you can grab like is it bound to Active Directory? That is a little weird, but the local IP is the thing that seems valuable because then you know what to scan, I guess, for right.
Yeah. I have to look back because I don't believe you can get the local IP. You can get the visiting IP, obviously, from multiple places. But there is other interesting data that you can gather through JavaScript related to the endpoint. You know,
You're thinking of running that in parallel with running the exploit, right? Because this is getting a foothold in the system, right, in the environment. So while you're running the exploit to get the foothold, you're running another worker that's also scanning the environment to get additional data. So
What?
my thought is, right, that you kind of, I know you had the background knowledge for, you know, what IP ranges were in place, but like, for me, like as an anonymous attacker, if I don't find some weird documentation of it and show me the IP scheme and everything, like, if I could grab the local IP, I would know they're in a 10.100, 100, or whatever, and scan that specifically versus something else.
Yeah, the key is the OSINT piece. And Nicholas is right. We had been in that environment multiple times. We knew exactly where everything was. We actually knew the /24. In a lot of cases, you're going to be scanning a /16 because you can call. I mean, pick up the phone and call the help desk and be like, "Hey, I'm getting this IP address. What should I get?" They'll tell you. But that level of OSINT and that level of understanding, you have to do ahead of time. You could, even scanning a /16 would require someone to stay on that watering hole page way too long. It was extremely difficult to get folks to stay on there long enough. Obviously, we did, but we went through, a little bit of disclaimer and disclosure. We went through multiple iterations of the website, and I can't tell you exactly what we did to protect those folks. But I mean, essentially. It was so enticing that they couldn't resist. And like I said, we actually had a form that they'd enter their stuff, like enter this drawing as an example. They'd enter their stuff, the form would error out and shift focus back to the first name field and say, please refill out this information if you want to submit. And if you have a good enough hook, people are going to do that multiple times. Again, all I need is a minute, 30 seconds to scan enough of the IP space. And we also actually even wound up breaking it up. We took down one version of the JavaScript and uploaded another one that broke up. So the first one would scan the first half of the 24. The second version would scan the second half, just to make sure that we had enough time in each IP space to compromise something, because we knew it's a little bit slow. I mean, it doesn't look slow on here, and actually when you execute it, it's not, but it's waiting for the first tent or return or timeout, and then it'll continue on. So OSINT is the key.
So kind of more of a comment to like your metadata question. Take a look at what payment processors are doing with the exact same background JavaScript stuff. Like they're fingerprinting obscene amounts of data about what the machine is, what it's doing, what your TCP/IP stack is, and all sorts of stuff that they're using to detect fraud with the exact same mechanism that Jarrod's leveraging, as a red team. So take a look into some of that stuff, because it's pretty wild what they're doing with the exact background
Yeah, financial institutions will like gather your, they do weird stuff, gather your screen size, your language, all kinds of relevant information so that they can check for fraud. Yeah, you're right.
Another question for you real quick. How bad did you see like it hitting the browser up when you were running the tooling? Like, if you're on a relatively static page where you're filling out a form, like, is it going to lag so bad that
No.
they notice?
No, they will notice it, it'll slow down. Like if they're like, I just want to go to this other tab and pull something else up, I would say it would be noticeable, but not any worse than like if you have Spectrum and it sucks and you're just having a rough day, you know. And I say that, obviously it depends on the computer, the browser, and how much of the RAM that the browser's eating, but it was relatively negligible in all my testing now and previously, because we tested this extensively before we launched it, as hopefully all decent and responsible red teamers do, even though this is irresponsible. But yeah, negligible.
Gotcha. I haven't read the documentation in a while. Is there a limit on how many web workers you can run simultaneously on a page, or?
That's a good question.
Take a look at what they're doing with mining in the browser, multi-threading and all that stuff. It's pretty broad, how much resources you can suck up.
Yeah, I mean, we targeted 10 at one time, and that was it. So I guess, yeah, I don't know. I think you'd run into a lot of issues if you went, 256 and up. I do it. Let me know it too, because I'm interested. It'll be fun. All right, cool. Well, thanks everybody. I appreciate it.